Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us again for Anchoring the Consciousness of Oneness World Summit. I'm Sarah Daves, co-host for this event, and today we'll be talking with Lois Kniss, Soul Signature Coach from Richmond, Virginia, and we'll be discussing the Divine Feminine and healing the split. Lois works with women who have experienced a questioning of personal value and meaning, unfulfilling or unhealthy relationships, dissatisfaction with work, or just feeling an overall sense of powerlessness. She supports women in discovering their own energetic soul signature, and that helps them to come home to who they really are and line up their lives with that truth so they can blossom and shine in every area of their life. Thank you, Lois, for being here with me today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. So let's first talk about the divine feminine and what that is. How does the divine relate to feminine energy? And then how would you describe the feminine?
Sure, yeah. So to me, as I look out at the trees, the divine is just like everything and everywhere. It's the underlying energy that moves and takes shape and takes form in physical manifestations, what we can see and feel. And it's just infusing everything. It's the life force is how I see it, which also love is another word from my perspective. And then the feminine is like one aspect or one face of how that expresses in the physical world, in the physical form, and how things work in cycles, in regeneration and creation. It's all a part of how things work. And the feminine is more of the resting, more of the inner aspect that's necessary to also then be able to go out and create.
Okay, yeah. So basically, what you're saying is that so the masculine is the taking action, and the resting and receiving is the feminine, and you have to have a balance of both, right, in order to go out and take action in the world. But that's where the creativity comes from, is the feminine energy.
Yes, that's where a lot of the inspiration can come. Where there's a space for the inspiration to come into. If we're so busy and up in our minds all the time, we're just kind of doing the same as we've always done. There's not as much opportunity for synchronicity, for just allowing things to unfold.
Right. Yeah. So how did you start doing this work? How did you become a soul signature coach? A lot of times what I've noticed in my own life, I'm noticing that that it takes a major life crisis before you can really stop and pay attention to what your soul came here to do and then step into that. So how did you find yourself on this path?
Yeah, it's been a while, and there have been threads all the way through all of my life, but I always enjoyed kind of thinking about spirituality, and that was part of my path, and yet it wasn't integrated into who I am. And I was doing my life really pretty well, having a family, kids, homeschooling my kids, living in different places. But somewhere along the line, I didn't know how to deal with conflict, for one thing. And so I started going inside and churning up bitterness for myself in my marriage, but kind of keeping that surface going nicely, everything looked okay. But eventually that doesn't last, that isn't sustainable, wasn't for me. And through a relationship crisis that just kind of turned everything upside down in my world, that's when I knew I needed to absolutely do something different, find a new way. And so I did a lot of healing work of old childhood stuff, the things that contributed to how I did manage to survive in the world up till then, and how I functioned, but there's a lot of unhealthy stuff there. So cleaning up some of that, and then getting to the point, okay, I'm feeling pretty good. Now what do I do? My kids are grown and they're on their own more. What can I do to contribute? And so that's what I was looking for. And it went through one of those divine breadcrumb trails of connections and random happenings. I got hooked up with somebody at a conference. We were assigned roommates, and she helped people figure out what their soul was here to do. So it was like this perfect match of, roommate with somebody who who could show me or help me find that path. And so through that is where I learned about the divine navigation and how I'm hardwired, what I'm here to experience and express in energetic kinds of terms or experiential kinds of terms. And then through that lens, it just made sense, or it came that I could also help other women with this same process and work. So that's how I came to be doing the coaching work that I do.
Wow. Yeah. So it always seems to be the case, right? So what we need healing in our own lives, when we find it, that becomes our purpose a lot of times.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's so much what we need to hear and need to learn for ourselves too. What we want to offer and what we teach. It's like, oh yeah, yep, that's me.
Yeah. You can't necessarily go to college for that, right?
Oh.
Yeah, that's definitely life lessons. So when you're helping women discover their energetic soul signature, what are the types of things that you walk them through, and is it like in searching or rediscovering their feminine essence?
It connects up. There is that energetic soul signature that I work with people, and it's a meditative, body-centric process for uncovering that. And then it may or may not relate to a lot of work with the feminine, but to me, once you know what that is and you're figuring out how that expresses in your life as a woman, there's ways that relate, it all links up. So you do the work of understanding yourself as a woman as well, because that's often a lot of our wounding is around being women. And so to heal like the soul and the woman and the divine split, that becomes a part of it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So yeah. So there are some very unique experiences that women only deal with as far as wounds and collecting those as we grow. Can you talk about some of those unique issues that are just unique to women?
There's a sense, I think, of kind of, at least I grew up in a tradition that taught a hierarchical view of the world, basically. And I was taught, okay, God is up here somewhere. The next is the church, because that's what I grew up in. Next is men, and next is women. And so it's like, that's the chain of authority. And so you've got to be listening up through all those levels to reach that divine peace. So I lost track of your question there. You want to redirect me here?
I know that's pretty heavy. I mean, we're talking, yeah, it's like that's a typical wound for, or a situation that can create a wound for a woman, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so the divine aspect is like expected to adhere to that hierarchy. And then also, there's a certain state of being that's expected to be um, sweet
Yes.
or quiet, and take care of others.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the submissiveness is one huge piece. That's a quality that is to be, respected.
Right.
And so then, as a kid, that, if you go against that, or even growing up and it's just like this, you dumb down, you quiet down, you be nice, and you lose yourself in trying to be this other image or that nice person, like you said, takes care of people. And when we're not that, at least, if we're authentic, we're not. I'm not. Let me speak for myself. And so then there's this feeling like I'm not good enough. I'm bad. I'm not worthy. But we try to keep, that image going. And yeah, it doesn't feel good. But when we go to the opposite extreme and try to negate the feminine or become masculine as a way of gaining that equality, quote, equality, that doesn't feel good either. It's not sustainable for me as a woman, for us as women, for the feminine essence.
Right. Yeah. And so that's kind of what we've been noticing over generations, right? With like women trying to feel liberated, and have equal pay, or even just to get a job. I mean, when women weren't allowed to work, and then they were. And so, I guess that stress of like, being property, and not even, being able to own property because you are property, and then not being able to work and being totally reliant on men, created the need for women to kind of go there to that masculine place and own that space. But now, we're balancing that out. I mean, it's not totally balanced, but a lot of women, I know I grew up believing that I had to work harder to show that I could do everything a man can do and better. And I got very comfortable in the masculine energy and really lost track of my womanhood. And I think that's where a lot of women end up these days. And then, we're not in the creative space, and we're not, coming into ourselves or recognizing how we can use that feminine energy to create.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, we get depleted when we don't take that time, when we don't allow ourselves to be receptive. That's one of the biggest pieces that I found was challenging, because kind of in that equal thing, there's a sense that like women are less than, weaker. That's the feminine image of weakness or superficiality. That's the stereotype, say, older. And then to counteract that, no, I don't need anybody to open the door for me, or help me with anything. I can do this. I got this. And that's exhausting and draining, partly because that's not how we're really wired. We've got more of that yin characteristic, where receptivity is not a weakness. It's a power to be able to receive and then transmute that into a different form of just having more energy for what you're wanting to enjoy or wanting to do.
Yeah, so women who are embodying the majority of the time the masculine energy and walking in that energy they're the way I look at it is like they're working too hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like you don't have to do everything on your own. When really, if you just go within and then you wait and open yourself to receiving, then things come effortlessly, or more effortlessly, right?
Right. Yeah, I remember when I was kind of practicing this thing of receptivity. I could just see myself so clearly. I'm out back in my yard, struggling to put some shade screens on our windows for the summer to cut down on cooling costs and that kind of thing, or be more comfortable. And so I was hot and, irritated and thinking, why doesn't my husband come out and help me? It's like, I could ask. And it not be like this, oh, you should do it yourself. It's, you're being weak. No, I can ask for help if that's what I'm wanting. And then it just like, oh, this feels so much better. And he was fine. He was willing. No issue, no problem. He was happy to help me out. So it's like, okay, I can shift this pattern from what I used to do and be more open to the relaxation and the ease in allowing myself to receive.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because I'm thinking about like what the masculine energy means. Like it's taking action and helping the feminine energy move through the world, right? So we're creating or holding the space for creation, and then the masculine energy takes it on and manifests that with action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think also there's kind of two aspects that I think of with the masculine: protect and provide. And that feels so good for the masculine essence. And if we're being there, no, I don't need anything, I'm good. It's like, okay, where do I fit in this picture?
Right. And so, yeah. And so you see that too with men these days, right? They're just like, where like, who am I and where do I matter?
Yeah.
So what's been your toughest leap in seeing the feminine as one with the divine? Because you talked about that hierarchy that you grew up with, and like that's a lot of layers to get to the divine.
Yeah. I think something about how I'm wired with my energies, I have kind of gravitated towards the feminine images of goddess, say, early on. And it was like this, oh, I'm hitting into a taboo zone here from my background, But it just called me. And so I was involved in that. And yet it also, there was something not quite rooted in me about it, or really personally connected. It felt like too much the other way, in a sense, like excluding the masculine, not having a place for that or not honoring that. Okay, this is the way. And to, I think, then shift into seeing it more of an aspect of the whole, a valid aspect, just like the masculine, and that it's a lens for our poor little minds to try and grasp any of this unnamable way, just energy and experience that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think is needed for the creative process I mean, for women who are watching this, and even for men, like, you've got to have both. Like you said, you have to have that balance of the masculine and the feminine. And so how do those work together, and what, like, in the creative process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you think about like a seed being planted into the earth, and then it's got that gestation period. It's a softening, it's a changing, the shell or whatever it's been protecting it has to dissolve and release so that the inherent life that's within it can sprout. But that takes a protected space, and that's a non-active place. So in a way, I see this seed planting is allowing ideas to flow in by being receptive, by opening up, being still, being willing, just listening, I think, like you mentioned. And then not forcing, not pushing, but allowing that process for whatever it needs to have the strength to start, pushing its way up out of the soil, start being expressed as your ideas to other people. And I think then that is starting to take more of that, like, force, that externally focused force, to have the courage to share an idea or to start a process or to step out and do something, just like a shoot. But then it needs to be nurtured. So there's the feminine again, to me, as far as nurturing the environment so that it has a safe place to be expressed.
Wow. Yeah. So that reminds me of the plants that you planted in the little box.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit, and how that relates to what we're talking about?
Yeah. This was an exercise from a book called E Squared by Pam Grout. I might have that title wrong, but it's something to that effect. And so the idea was to check out how powerful your thoughts and intentions are. So I had this egg carton of, put dirt in it, and I planted some, I think there were flower seeds of some kind. And the idea was to give more attention and saying, talking and just these seeds on this end are going to grow quicker and faster than the other ones. Until they sprout. So each day you're just kind of like saying, ooh, you're going to do great. You're going to do awesome. And you water them the same, having the light, just like, all things being equal. And then they sprouted, and they did. These ones on this end sprouted first. And they grew. And then, there was one that kind of poked its head up on this end, but for the most part, these grew more and this didn't.
Wow.
So to just even see that the power of our focused nurturing, attention, love given, you can see it.
Yeah, that is so amazing. It's like, and so you were talking about, like, the gestation period, that's the feminine, and then the taking action, the rooting, the actual sprouting, that's the action. So that's masculine. And then the nurturing on the end of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you proved that it works, right?
Yeah. That's true. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, that's the power of the feminine energy, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. The nurturing and the masculine can do all of it as well. We all have all aspects within ourselves. It's just kind of more the balance and how that shows up. And it doesn't matter, our bodies, whether they're men or women, it's the energies of the receptive, with the yin, the yang, the feminine essence, the masculine essence.
Right, right. So, um, I know that, so I've experienced this with you. You walk women through experiencing the different energies.
Right.
Yeah. Can you explain that and what that looks like to walk women through the different types of energy and
Yeah,
the
sure.
feedback that you've received?
Yeah. So it's an exercise that I have done in a class that you were a part of, that you start, it's a contrast between the neutral and the masculine and the feminine energies, and how that creates a difference in your experience in the world. Okay, so the practice is to close your eyes, get centered, and drop all the masculine or feminine energies out of you to get to the neutral. And you go through, you put on some neutral, imagine putting on some neutral garment, some neutral color, hearing a neutral sound, and then you walk through the space and see what you notice. And the same thing with the masculine, then you think of a masculine that you associate with masculine color and outfit, and you put it on in your mind's eye, and then in that energy walk again. And then same with the feminine, with the color and the outfit that you imagine you put on. In between, just kind of letting all the other ones out of the picture. So what I've seen with the neutral is kind of this robotic movement. You're just kind of blah. You walk around, it's like, okay, whatever, here I am. With the masculine, it's more of like, okay, here I am. Your energy comes up into your shoulders. You walk more forcefully. You notice different things around you. It's amazing. I would notice things like that feel a little bit insecure. Like if it's night and there's an open window or door, it's like, let's take care of that. That energy just comes up. And with the feminine, it's like a softer walking through the space. You notice more detail. You notice more color. For women, that feels more natural, or women that are predominantly have that feminine essence. Not all women do, but the majority do. But it's really interesting to imagine and feel, oh, I can see why a guy does that or feels that way or whatever. Okay, that starts to make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you are grew up like I did, and, and seeing, women running the household, because it's just the household and working a full-time job, because we can do it all.
Yeah.
Do it better.
Yeah.
Then, that's embodying a masculine energy most of the time. So when I was doing that exercise, that actually felt more comfortable in a way, because it was more familiar.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the things women notice is, where do I hang out most of the time? Often it is in that neutral, because, you haven't learned how to be safe and to be a woman. You gotta feel like you've got to have this guard up. And then you can actually, in the work I do, you learn a different way of having that sense of protection that's coming more from the inside rather than blocking and having a wall up.
Yeah. And so when I let go of that masculine energy and was sitting in that meditative place where I'm imagining, filling myself up with feminine energy, and in my mind's eye, putting on a beautiful dress or something, and thinking of the colors that I associate with feminine energy, and then got up and walked around your house.
Yeah.
It felt really great. I actually felt a little bit, Well, it was a little uncomfortable. I'll be honest, because I'm not used to being there. I wasn't at the time. And you've helped me so much with that. Thank you. But yeah, so at first I was like, this feels kind of weird, but I felt alive. I'm like, wow, how long has it been since I have actually felt this energy and embodied it like this? And I couldn't honestly remember, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something we just kind of pick up and learn without even knowing. Like, yeah, we have no idea that we've got that's what we're doing. We just kind of do what we experience or get taught or see to survive and cope. But that's not necessarily really fulfilling.
Right. I think that's like moving through life, operating with your defense mechanisms rather than your soul essence. And then, so that's what you teach, the soul energetic signature. And that might look different for each. Well, if it's unique, it definitely would look different for each one.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But so, I mean, it really honestly changed my life and the way that I move in the world. I spend a lot less time efforting than ever, and like more time like in a place of knowing, like giving myself the space to just have an awareness, and instead of pushing, I just listen to my inner guidance system that tells me maybe today is not the time to take this action. I'll just kind of a friend of mine, Albert Moore, who's actually another speaker, he said, he said the feminine energy is kind of like a butterfly flying from flower to flower and just pollinating around as it sees fit, or however it feels, and then everything gets done and you just kind of do what you feel rather than pushing through, with that masculine energy. And so that, so can you help, or maybe like explain to women, like how, if they wanted to like get into this feminine space where they're, it could be like a single mom, who's like got to be mom and dad and got to go to work and, make sure everybody gets fed and, all that stuff. But then they've got the nurturing piece of, they've got to show up that way too. So there's a lot of people who are, I mean, we're always using both on some level, I would think, but if for women who are like the majority of the time existing in the masculine energy because of, their corporate job or whatever, how they have to show up there, or feel like they have to show up,
right?
How can they embody their feminine essence? Like what can they do on their own?
Okay. The one thing that came to mind right now was to start to give the same care to yourself as you give to, say, a child. Whether you have your own child or not, you can kind of imagine how that would be. If you were caring for them, and you're in a good space, because I know I've had kids and I have done things that like, no, not that way. But when you're like with a baby and you're bathing a baby, what about just at least being kind to yourself when you're taking a shower? Just slowing down. And the sensory piece of it is big for women, to actually stop and enjoy the water on your skin, to take a little bit of time to be gentle as you're, washing yourself off, or, take time in each, when you think of it, to taste that chocolate you're eating. Enjoy the juice of that fruit. It's like being in the moment in that way is, that really would support. That's one small way that would have big effects, I think, to just kind of, and part of that is recognizing that you're actually worth it to give that care to. I think, if you can, because you might even have resistance, like, what? Nah, you know, have that resistance to it without quite knowing, oh, I don't think I'm worth taking care of like this. Everybody else is, but not me.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the things that I tell my clients is do 3 nice things for yourself every day. And they laugh. They think it's hilarious.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. They're like, what? And I'm like, it doesn't have to be, like a massage today and a facial tomorrow, or, it doesn't have to be that, but it's like lighting a candle or sitting down and having a piece of chocolate and just enjoying every bite. And, and yeah. I said, it's not getting up and doing the laundry because, you're going to feel better later. It's not even doing yoga when you're tired, because that's not where it's at. So it's more just about, giving yourself the same nurturing as you would your children, or, as a woman, the people in your life,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. It's starting with yourself. And that's kind of the whole theme of like this whole summit is, the oneness and us being connected. And so like, where do you begin? It's the going within.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, because going within, one, just as a human being in relating to something that we can't physically see, which is, that's the separation piece, and we start to believe that separation because we can't see it. So as a human being, to honor the sacred in all of life. And then I think it's a second level, more challenging perhaps for some anyway, of the feminine as a woman, to see that, yes, this energy is in me as equally valid, equally necessary, equally crucial to the masculine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. Because like the feminine to me is just so magical in so many ways, because it is the earth energy. So we're very connected to what's going on.
Yes.
Yeah. Like the moon cycles and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just getting grounded in the earth, like walking outside barefoot or standing in the grass or something, even in your own yard.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I found, kind of serendipitously, I used to do it more often, but then I got away from it. I went to Maymont here in Richmond, and just lay on the grass. I didn't have that intention for going, but it was like, okay, I just want to lay down here. And when I got up, it was like, oh, I just feel rejuvenated. I'd forgotten that energizes me, and is a place that I can go and just kind of like be held in that nurturing, the groundedness, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. You can feel it. I mean, if you're zooming out with an intention to notice the energetic connection that you have, or that the feminine essence has with the earth, because that's what we have, Mother Earth, and
Yeah.
that's the expression here in this reality, right? Yeah, that's a really good way to plug back in to that feminine space. But in thinking about it from a, I don't know, let's say a global perspective, how, like, in all the ways that the feminine energy is used and needed in our 3D reality here, how do we allow and bring the feminine back to an honored and integral part of the process of creation? Like, what does that look like?
Okay. I think it's something in how we can show up differently, because you can't force it on anybody else, but in showing up in a way that is a complete honoring of yourself as a woman, standing in that knowing, that power. And then, there's ways to practice, experiencing that or learning it. But the essence is that you are showing up differently. And when you show up differently from your change, that changes the whole. And I think that's where the oneness understanding of, we are all at that energetic level totally connected. And so when we make that shift and are willing to show up fully in our world in a different way, and it might be in stages, it might take some courage, and experimenting, but when it feels good, it's going to communicate out to others, and it gives them permission to do the same, and to show up more authentically too. So I think that is maybe where it would come from and how it might ripple out.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, because it makes me think about what we typically equate femininity with, and that is nurturing and taking care of others. But you're talking about that's also a masculine and so I want to say too, I'm not saying masculine energy is not important. I think that we've had a lot of that here on the earth, and bringing the feminine essence back is one of the key components to recognizing oneness on the planet. Mm-hmm. But in considering the nurturing aspect of the feminine energy, that's where kind of we can get stuck. And one of the things that I've learned from you is it's less of taking action for others or emptying your cup, and more of being a shining example. Can you explain that a little bit? And shining your light.
Yeah. It's there's the difference between acting and being. And I think our habitual ways have been to just, act in certain ways. But I think that coming from a being, and actually it's a loving yourself that is needed, an honoring of yourself that's needed, and then that does spill over in how you can actually honor others more. Because I can be I can be critical of things out there, and I'm learning that that's a sign that I need to be more loving here, because there's something about me that I'm not accepting and embracing. When I'm looking out there, I think it's out there, but no, it comes back here. And then I'm much more able to be present and be creative and contribute from that deep-rooted, just I'm good.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so it's the world is your mirror. And so whenever we're judging, then we can certainly turn it back on ourselves and say, okay, where do I need to look at this in my own life or my own actions, or how am I judging myself, right?
Yes.
Yes. Right.
The other thing I thought of as you were talking was with the masculine, feminine, I think there's kind of these shadow expressions of each of the masculine and the feminine, and that's where we've been operating in, and that's what gets us into all kinds of trouble with things not going so well in the world, just all this outward stuff that's going on. And so that inner healing for both it's gonna be a gorgeous and amazing balance when we get there.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
So what does it look like? What does the shadow aspect of the masculine and feminine look like in our reality?
Yeah. For the feminine, I think it's more that weaker. Um, it's the caretaking of others. It's pleasing others, trying to seek for approval, trying to get value by being pleasing out there. At least that's how I've experienced it. And the masculine, it seems like maybe it's that more of the forcing, pushing, forceful power over, rather than a powerful, like, lifting up and guiding kind of an energy.
Yeah, we see that in the corporate world. It's full of competition,
Yeah. Yeah.
separation.
Mm-hmm. And there can be healthy, fun competition, like to just see, especially with yourself, can I do better than that? Rather than putting, it be a better than, worse than kind of a competition.
Right. Yeah. So if the shadow side of the masculine energy is like this competition, which is creating separation and pushing other people down, and the hierarchy in our systems and every system that we have in our reality at this point, that we live in our society, what does the other side look like? And what do you call that? If that's the divine masculine, what does the divine masculine look like?
Yeah. Huh. Um, I just see a real confident, clear, like a visionary maybe. Just confident in their own beingness so that they don't have to push anybody down in order to feel like of value. It's not in comparison, but it's just like that, again, rooted in your gifts as the masculine and what feels good for you to offer and create and make and just that fun stuff.
Yeah. And so the shadow side of the feminine, that's the overgiving at the expense of yourself, like giving with an empty cup, basically.
Right.
Yeah, and then having to, I don't know, it's like I remember being a kid and thinking that boys were bad and girls were good. And that was kind of like, yeah, that was kind of like the thing. And so I had to be really good and really sweet. So that's the socialization of that shadow side manifesting. But what does the divine feminine look like? How does the divine feminine show up?
I think it's in there's a vision of the well-being of the whole, maybe, that is accessed by being present with yourself and with all of you, accepting all of, how we show up, even when it's not awesome. To just that warm, universal embrace of the mother, the universe, that love just like pouring out and supporting the evolution of better and happier people, more joy, more pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. Instead, yeah, to me that it's like the feminine is the oneness and the masculine is the supporting, the foundation of that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I can see how that makes some sense. And maybe it's just like two aspects of it's in our experience as humans. And I don't know how, like, the energetics of it, on the on the infinite level, on that level, how that expresses. But I'm making this up. I'm just guessing that in this form, in this manifestation of how we live, that maybe the feminine does have more of that global awareness. And then there's a sense of presence. Maybe that's the masculine that you're kind of referring to. There's a presence, and then there's kind of that life force that bubbles up and does things and bubbles up in forms, life forms. I don't know, I'm making that up.
It's a fun thing to explore, and just like in the knowing of, the differences and stuff. And it's like we've gotten really confused. And so in coming back, like in my experience, and working with you and coming back to that sense of, I don't know, it feels like coming home, like you said, to yourself. It feels like, it feels kind of magical.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the word I want to use to describe it, because when you step into and embrace the energy that you are most comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about comfortable because you're used to doing it. I'm talking about like it really feels good, and for me, it's the feminine energy.
Yeah.
That has like amplified my intuition, I guess you would say, because, well, I mean, not only, for my coaching and seeing like through the veil, and that's a whole different story. But what I'm talking about is like knowing when to not take action, knowing when to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, how would you explain to women when they feel like, they're exhausted, their cup is empty, they feel like they have to keep going and there's no choice, and so they just push through, like, what are the indicators that, like, for them to, have the red flag pop and say, okay, this is not necessary, I can do something different? Like, what are those indicators and what can they do in that moment?
Yeah. I think even just raising that as a question
Mm-hmm.
allows that awareness to come to women. Like knowing that there is another way, that there is a choice, then, it might be after the fact when you're really exhausted and drained. It's like, oh, I could have maybe taken it slower, or, rested in that moment, or whatever, thoughts come. And then as you keep being willing to say, wait a minute, when there's something that doesn't feel good, that's the time to wake up and to say, I have some choice here. And then to either give yourself space later. Okay, another time when that happens, I can, think of things, think of possibilities in retrospect, and then it'll get closer to the time when you realize in the moment, it's like, okay, this is it. Now I have a choice how to either show up or take care of myself, or, what I can do differently.
Yeah, so you're really just talking about the awareness, like becoming aware of how you're feeling in the moment,
Yes.
being aware that emotions are coming up for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then honoring that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Lois, for doing this with me and taking the time to interview. I love you so much, and I appreciate all of your wisdom. You are so amazing to me, and yeah, I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So, for for people watching, if you have any questions for Lois, you can go to the Facebook group and type something in. Just make sure to tag her. But if you also can go to her website, and we'll have that in the Facebook group as well. But it's soulgardening.com, but there's a hyphen in there.
Yeah, soul-gardening.com.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Lois.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. This was such fun.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure talking to you. And love and light to everyone else. I appreciate you being here. Yeah, so we'll see you next time. And thank you again.
All right.